connecting you to people, knowledge, and business development in the line striping industry. This is Stripe It Like It's Hot. Brought to you by Blacktop Banter with your host, Cam Roberts.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Stripe It Like It's Hot. I'm very excited because we're not going to be talking about striping today, which is kind of exciting. We're going to talk about something else that a lot of people, myself included, need to know more information about, which is sweeping. And today, have I got the guy? I found the guy who's all things sweeping. How did we even find each other, Mr. Matt Andrews?
If I remember right, I think you were posting a question about a sweeper for sale that you had found, and I said, well, hey, it could be a good deal, or maybe it's a bad deal. I don't know, but we kind of went into all the intricacies of things to look for and to check for to try to determine the value of that used sweeper, and then we got talking podcasts. So
Okay,
that's
so that's
I
the
believe
modest
how we met.
version. That's the modest version,
Yes.
because what really happened is I'm an idiot, don't know what I'm talking about, said, hey, is this sweeper for sale in my area a good deal? And you're like, bro, call me, here's my phone number. Like, nobody does that. Nobody does that. So I think we chatted for like an
Yep,
hour.
that's it.
Oh man. Yeah, you've got a pretty cool story into how you got into sweeping. So I'd love to dive into that because I know for a fact, especially in Canada, man, there's a lot of people that listen who are into striping and want to incorporate like sweeping into their services on some level, and they just have no idea how to do it. So, yeah, Matt Andrews, thank you for coming. So yeah, give us like the 2 minute version. Where are you from? And what did you do before sweeping? What made you get into it? All that stuff.
Yeah. So, well, a lot of different avenues here. So, anyways, I started off in sweeping in 2014, and it was originally one of those things that I'd kind of always seen from a distance, and I always kind of liked the niche businesses. That was kind of my focus, and it just so happened that I was working for a electronic security company, and I was a project manager at the time, and I was kind of running the operations department, and my wife and I had just had our baby. And it was at that point where it was kind of like, hey, it's getting close for the kid to go to daycare and start getting into school. And my wife was just kind of like, well, daycare costs are so high. So we had this brilliant idea of like, hey, let's just buy a little company and we can kind of run it on the side, and I will help out whenever I'm not working, sort of thing. And she can kind of do the day-to-day bookkeeping and scheduling type stuff. So we came across this sweeping company that was for sale, and we thought it was a great fit. It was a husband and wife team. They both had full-time jobs. They did it on the side, and it was one of those things that I said, "Hey, this will be a good fit, good price." So we decided to pull the trigger, and so I took a week off from work, and I told the owner of the company that I was working for at the time, security company. I said, "Hey, you know what? We bought this. This is the plan, and I'm taking a week off to go learn the business per se." So I took that week off, and at the time I was new to all of it, and at the end of that week I was like, this is not a part-time gig at all. And we'd already spent all the money, our
Oops.
entire life savings basically at that point. And I was like, hey, if we're gonna do this, we gotta, it's all in. So I quit my job that was, supporting our entire family at the time.
How long
And
after you bought the company did you quit your job?
I bought the company, and then I quit my job. I took a week off from work, and then that first week back to work. So like the second week of owning the company, about halfway through it, I was like, I gotta go all in on this. So
Oh my goodness.
I ended up at that point, sit down and talk to my boss. I told him, and he flat out said, he goes, yeah, you know what, he goes, anybody that owns a business, usually it's not a part-time gig, no matter how small you want to be or whatever it is. So I worked out a deal with him, and I stayed on. I think I took like a month to transition out because I had a lot of projects going at the time. And then there was probably another month where, they'd call me about questions and stuff going. And I helped him out, he helped me get going. So that was cool. So that was a good relationship I still have with those guys. So it started the journey of my wife and I having the small little parking lot sweeping company at the time. And it was tough. The parking lot sweeping was a rough business. It's basically all commercial business, commercial work. and you're cleaning strip centers. You might have these one-off jobs, things like that that were coming into place. And it was just one of those things that you're working opposite shifts. You're the vampires, man. You're working at night, and it was one of those things that I was like, hey, one truck with these prices and the way things were going, I said, this it's not sustainable. It's not going to last. You can't be the one man band, running at night. You're just, your family life's going to go to heck, and everything happened with that. So we decided at that point, hey, the only way to make this a sustainable business was to grow it. We got to get to the point where you got guys running at night, so you can go sell jobs during the day and grow the business. And then, so we started doing that. We had very good luck with that. It wasn't that difficult. I think in that first year of business, the first 6 months in business, we probably doubled revenue in such a short time. I mean, we weren't doing a lot of revenue at the beginning. So we pretty much doubled the business that we bought. So that was good. And we started hiring some people. We had a couple guys at that point, I think a full-time and a part-time guy. And so we got going down that rabbit hole. And once we kind of started learning more about the business, it was one of those things that, you only knew what you knew. And the first thing I did was, we looked at getting in contact with World Sweeping Organization. So they kind of opened up a lot of opportunities for us with different training options and things like that. And then we went down to our first pavement expo. I think it was our second year, and we started meeting people in the industry, and that was really the turning point for us. So we met with a lot of these people that have been doing it for 20, 30 plus years, multiple generation companies. And we ended up joining NAPSA on top of World Sweeper. And we also ended up joining up with 1-800 Sweeper eventually. And all those different organizations gave you access to other owners of companies across the country. And it was one of those things that was really mind changing because, they invited you into your business. We would go around the country and meet with different owners, sit with them for a day, whatever it was, watch their organization, what worked well with them. And, there's so many little niches inside the asphalt world, as you guys have known, that every company was so drastically different. One guy might do sweeping, just parking lots. Some guys might only do municipalities. But then you also find out that this guy's doing power washing, and then this guy over here is doing line striping and asphalt maintenance. And we had one guy who was running water trucks down in Arizona, which was like a big business, I guess. So it was amazing. At all these different companies you meet and you talk with these people, you gain almost these friendships with these people, and it became this huge advantage that whenever you're having a problem with a truck or a piece of equipment or maybe even a large customer, you just reach out and start calling around to these different people, and they're like, oh yeah, talk to this person or call this, or so and so had that extra part sitting on a shelf. It was always one of those things that you gain like this fraternity. And the only reason my wife and I were able to make the biggest growth that we did in such a short period of time was those relationships that we built. We were able to really expand and grow on basically other people's trials and tribulations. But they spent years, developing and learning, and they were more than willing and happy to share that information with us. So we were forever grateful on that. So that's kind of where we started and kind of how we ended up. And obviously the road in between was not as narrow and defined as I just explained it, but
It sounds
we
easy when you
quickly,
sum it up in 5 minutes, right?
yeah, exactly. There was lots of heartaches in between there. But we did find that, once we met with those other companies and we found all the different little specialty niches inside the industry itself, we found the opportunities. And I do believe that in almost any business or any industry, really, there are those little niches and opportunities that I think by really exploring those, they really open up tons of opportunities and places to create margin that you're not going to get anywhere else.
Totally. Man, so I didn't buy a company when I started, but I was very similar to you. Like I didn't know what I was doing when I started striping, and no
Right.
experience. And it's funny like that, like you made it 2 weeks, with keeping your day job, which is crazy. Now, granted, you bought an established business, but yeah, you remind me of my situation in a similar way. Like you get in touch with these people in the industry, and you find out resources, and then you start to realize, yeah, I can't do this all myself, and then it just grows and grows. So, all in all, your company, how long were you there?
So we had our company for about 8 years, I think it was. And then when we sold, we were with the new company that bought us for about, I think it was just under a year. So I
Yeah.
mean, technically I was in the sweeping industry for about 9 years.
Wow. So day one, you buy this company, one sweeper, part time, which lasted, 2 weeks basically for you. And by the end, like you had grown this company quite large. That was what really was impressive to me.
Yeah.
You
So I
sold out.
can't,
How big was the company?
for legal reasons, I can't go into the total dollar amount that we were doing. But
Yeah.
I mean, full disclosure, when I bought the company, we were probably doing, I want to say it was right around 100 grand a year when we bought the company. So it wasn't much. And then probably the first 2 to 3 years, we basically doubled revenue every year.
Wow.
And then once we started shifting out of the parking lot game, we stayed in the business, but once we started shifting our focus into different niches, I guess, within the industry, you know, our revenue grew substantially, um, which created a lot more opportunity. And that's where we ended up. And there's days where, you know, you obviously second guess your choices that you made, but I think realistically, it's a great industry. It's a great opportunity. I mean, anything in the asphalt world, I think, is a great place to be. Luckily, the stuff doesn't last forever, and there's lots of opportunities to capitalize on that.
It's true. It's true. And that's why I was so psyched to connect with you. I was so grateful you gave me that hour. Like, just you helped me out tremendously. And there's a lot of line stripers. The two services go hand in hand. As far
Yeah.
as preparation goes, anyways. Like here in Canada, like I look out this window and there's like a sea of winter gravel. So if you want to be striping stuff, you got to get all that swept up first, of course. But the barrier to entry into sweeping is one thing I wanted to ask you because when you start pricing out new equipment anyways, it gets very pricey very quick. And it's hard, even for me, man, it's hard for me to sometimes see the clear path as to like how you grow and scale a business that's so dependent on the equipment. It's so dependent on, maintenance and upkeep. And what's the best way for someone who's thinking about it to get into it, I suppose? Like what's the easiest path for them to get started?
Yeah, so the good and the bad is like you said, the barrier to entry. The cost of the equipment is so high, especially with the way inflation and pricing on equipment's going nowadays, that I mean, obviously buying a new truck out of the gates is very tough unless you've got a serious contract that, is going to help support that. But, typically most people started off with, used beat up equipment, and you beat it down the road long enough to hopefully build some decent clientele, and you just keep slowly upgrading. And then, once you get down the road a while, you can start getting some new equipment into your fleet. But that's kind of the hard part, is there's so many different little, I guess, niches, or not even niches, if you want to use, like, I guess, industry sectors, I guess, inside the sweeping world. It's, like municipal work is great work. Usually it's somewhat steady. And then, you got the parking lot sweeping for businesses and things, which is good business, but it's usually lower margin, but the trucks are a little cheaper. And then, you got the construction sweeping, which is usually the best margin, but it's the least consistent work. You're basically on an on-call basis, and, you're making good money, but it's, you're sitting around waiting for it to happen, basically. So when somebody wants to get into it, most people in the industry start off on the parking lot sweeping game. And, it's good, steady work, but the problem is the margins are usually pretty low. And, you're battling, the city that I'm in, that I live in, this area, we got, maybe there's 5, 6 companies that do it.
Yeah.
And, they all got parking lot sweepers. They're all fighting over the same accounts. They're doing it for next to nothing. And, obviously property managers are always trying to save money. So they're like, hey, you want to keep the job, you can't raise prices this year. And it's hard because a lot of these smaller companies, these one-man band kind of guys, they need the work to justify keeping the truck and keep things going. But what they don't realize is they're just cutting into their own margins. And that's one of those things that if you really want to do it, the best way is to just to get a decent used truck. And I suggest you being a mechanic. The maintenance on sweepers are higher than anything I've ever came across before. They require a lot of work. And if you're charging enough to keep it going, then your headaches will be worth it because they do break. They break all the time. And I used to tell everybody, if you're going to be a contractor and you're going to do the sweeping, I suggest having two trucks because one's always going to be broke in some form or fashion. And
It's good
it
you're
doesn't
setting the
take much
standard.
for a driver to bang into something and twist something, or if you're on a milling job, they'll catch one of the cuts or something and twist something, and then your sweeper's down. So yeah, you got to have two. But if you can find a couple decent pieces of used equipment, and you got some work lined up, then you can keep them pretty busy. But you're going to spend a lot in maintenance. So I usually tell people if you're going to own a sweeper, own a mechanic too. If not, be very handy and available to work a lot on it. Because there was plenty of days when I first started, it was, I'd drive at night and then I'd spend, 4 to 6 hours during the day fixing the darn thing. And it was just it's a constant shuffle. And if you can get to the point where you have a mechanic or you have another business avenue that's supporting a mechanic or somebody doing maintenance on them, that helps too. So yeah, there's not a great easy entrance into it. Most of the people I've come across that do sweeping is they have other lines of business. You'll see a lot of people like in the parking lot sweeping game. They'll run like a lot of landscapers, for instance. You get a slightly bigger outfit that's got 5 or 6 crews running. A lot of times they'll have a sweeper or two because they already have the relationship set up at the properties
Yeah,
that they're
yeah.
servicing. So it's really just adding a piece of equipment and a guy, which I make that sound easy, and it's not that easy. But getting to work sometimes is the other barrier to entry per se. Um, you can find used equipment all over the place. It's just a matter of how long is it going to keep running before you got to dump more money into it. But that is probably the entry point for most people is the parking lot sweeping, the nightly sweeping kind of stuff. Um, it's usually a little more easier, a little forgiving. The equipment is probably the cheapest on that side of things. Um, but yeah, to get into the other avenues like the municipal and the construction sweeping, that requires usually bigger equipment and a lot more investment on the front end.
I love how you're setting the standard for everyone who's thinking about sweeping. Like, you better know how to fix crap and you better know what you're
Yes.
going to do. Don't just. So it's kind of funny because line striping's the kind of the opposite way. Like, it's got a pretty low barrier to entry, right? Even if
Yep.
you use a piece of equipment, you can get striping pretty quick. So I'm glad you're being realistic for us. Now, one thing I wanted to ask you, like, it had never been explained to me so succinctly when you and I talked on the phone and you gave me that hour. Like, you basically broke it down into as far as types of equipment go. Like, I thought I had a pretty good handle on it, but you basically said there's three, like three main groups of sweepers, which I thought was, as you were talking to me, I was on speakerphone and I'm scribbling notes on my phone like crazy to write this all down. So that's why I wanted to get you on here. What are those three primary sweeping types, and what should new guys consider when they're thinking of which one to buy?
Yeah. So yeah, there's basically three types of sweepers. You have um, regenerative air sweepers, which those are probably the most common because those are usually what all the parking lot sweepers are made by, or what type of sweeper they are. Um, and every sweeper is built kind of almost for a specific task, if you will. But the regenerative air sweepers are probably the most common. And then they have what they call a vacuum sweeper, which is similar to the regenerative air sweeper. It's obviously using suction like a vacuum truck, but it doesn't recirculate the air, so it exhausts it out. And then the third type is the mechanical sweeper, and that's what most asphalt guys are familiar with, because usually they have a bobcat or something like that with a broom on the front, and they obviously there's a variety of different ones under the mechanical sweeping, but those are essentially the three types of sweepers. But then on top of that, you have like small, like mid-size sweepers, and then large sweepers on top of that in each of those categories. And once again, that, like I said, it gets kind of down a rabbit hole here, but depending on the type of work that you're doing, so like regenerative air sweepers are usually built to get up lighter, fine debris. Not to say they can't pick up heavier debris, but where a lot of small sweepers get into a problem is, they'll take a mid-size regenerative air sweeper that, was meant for like picking up parking lot debris, like papers and light dirt, that kind of thing. And they'll pick up the heavier stuff. But the problem is the amount of wear and tear that the dirt is putting on that machine is they just get beat up and ate up, and just the maintenance goes even higher than it should. I mean, they're maintenance heavy to start with, but if you're doing a lot of that type of work, I mean, you're going to be sandblasting and blowing holes in just about everything. Controlling dust is very difficult when you get into heavy debris. It's just those kind of things. So picking the right sweeper with whatever job you're trying to do. So like a lot of asphalt guys, if they're trying to do like, say you're doing some milling, something like that, a lot of times it's best to use like a mechanical sweeper. If you got that heavier debris you're running, it's not going to get the fine dust and dirt as well, but it's going to pick up that heavy stuff really quick without completely eating up your fan and your suction tubes and all that kind of stuff. There's rubber on vacuum sweepers that just, if a rubber seal gets worn thin somewhere, it just the machine just stops working or not working well. And that's the kind of stuff where make sure you have the right sweeper for whatever you're trying to do will make everybody's life a lot easier, and it will allow you to get more life into it. So that's why if somebody's going to own one, you got to just be really careful of, number one, what kind of material am I going to be sweeping? And number two, how often am I going to be using it? Because a lot of times I'll see people, and you'll see this a lot of times with bigger companies. You get a bigger company that was hiring a sweeper maybe like one day a week or something, or even, sometimes they'll even hire somebody for like an hour a day, 5 days a week. And they're like, wow, I'm paying out all this money, I could own a sweeper. And it's like, well, you're right, you could. But, do you have a guy to maintain it? Do you have a guy that knows how to drive it, knows how to operate it? When it doesn't work, how big of a deal is it that something's not getting done? And that's where I've seen so many times where I've had customers come to me at the time and just say, hey, you know what, we got our own sweeper, but, the guy that we had, left, and the new guy doesn't know how to run it. Can you show him? Or, hey, it broke down. Can you come fix it? Or, this part's on back order, or, it's always a different story. But at the end of the day, making sure the right equipment is being used on the job, and making sure that you have, the right intentions with it, because, on paper, it might seem like sense to own one, but the level of maintenance, I can't stress enough, because that was one thing that I learned the hard way on. The guy told me from day one, like, hey, it's heavy maintenance. And I grew up on a farm maintaining equipment and stuff. And it's like, yeah, you got to grease, you got to fix, change stuff. Yeah, I get it. Right. And it's a lot more than that, put it that way. So,
So
yeah.
what's the upside then? Like where's the value for someone who wants to, maybe they're not even going to start their own business. Like you said, maybe they're going to add on to it. Like where do these people find the value to justify the cost of the time and the maintenance and the upkeep?
So if you can keep the truck working, say, I mean, every service industry per se, however you break it up, comes down to an hourly rate. And as long as you got decent hourly rates running into your equipment and you can keep them busy, then obviously it makes sense. I mean, it's not hard depending on, what industry you're in and where you're at to get the use out of equipment. If say you have a bigger sweeper that is running, I don't know, I haven't quoted one in about a year here, but let's just say it's running about $325,000 for a sweeper. You know, if you're running that thing 6, 8 months out of the year and you're keeping it busy 5, 6 hours a day, you're going to be doing pretty good. I mean, you'll make pretty good money with that. Um, Obviously, if you're charging the right amount, price fixing, we can't really talk too much about that. But with that being said, they can make a pretty good living on it. If if you keep in mind and allow for the maintenance, the stuff of equipment, it's one of those things that it's time consuming, but if you stay on top of it, grease is pretty cheap. The wear parts that are on it, most of the manufacturers have built them, so the wear parts aren't that expensive. Where it gets really expensive is the lack of knowledgeable people driving them. It's not hard to damage a sweeper, no matter what kind you're driving.
It's common
Um,
for employees. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And it's, that was one thing that was probably my biggest pain point, and it took
Yeah.
me 8 years and I probably still don't got it all figured out. But we found that you spend a lot more time training and finding the right people. It really saves you a lot of money in maintenance and repairs. Um, if I had a guy that, with the regenerative air sweeping heads, they have to sit flat on the ground and there's basically a rubber seal that goes around the bottom that creates the seal where it's cleaning. Well, if you have, they bang into a pothole or they catch a speed bump or a parking stop, anything, it just bends that head just a little bit. It breaks that seal and you lose your suction. I mean, not say it's still not going to pick stuff up, but it's going to take you twice as long at every job to do what you got to do. And that's the kind of stuff where I think a lot of people that own sweepers, you know, they get in trouble. If you're the owner and the operator guy running it and you know all this stuff, you know, you'll do pretty well. It's when you have to start hiring to get multiple people under and behind the wheel. That's where it gets difficult because obviously they aren't going to care for your equipment as much as you do. You're not going to take the time, or they're not going to take the time that you do. And that's where the biggest hang up is. So, there's definitely a lot of money and opportunity to be made in the industry. I mean, I did quite well with it. But there's lots of pain points too. Like you said, owning a striping unit compared to owning a sweeper truck is drastically different. And, stripers realistically are fairly cheap in the grand scheme of things. Um, but also too, on the striping side, it's not hard to have if you have employees, if they're doing a new layout and they do it wrong and you gotta go peel it all up again or reseal it, then you're gonna feel that too. So
Yeah, there's no effective way. Yeah, that's the trap in striping is the time of when you lay stuff out wrong. Absolutely. So like you sold the company after 8 years and like you say, there's only so much you can actually talk about because of the agreement there, which is completely understandable. But like what was from year zero, buying it, being in that security company to year eight, like what was the secret sauce for you guys? Because I feel like you've done a really good job explaining all the reasons that you should be really careful getting into this industry.
yeah.
So obviously it worked for you though, because you had grown to quite the fleet. So what was the secret sauce for you?
Um, well, we had so many different avenues, which really helped us, especially through like the start of COVID, everything shut down. So the real big problem during COVID was, like all our, a lot of the municipality work, a lot of I guess maybe the corporate offices that we used to service on a regular basis, like a lot of that business went away. And that hurt a lot of businesses depending on, what kind of niches you were on in the industry. But luckily, we were so diversified in our customer base that it really helped us. So when one side of the business would fall, the other side would actually pick up. So we were one of the few sweeping companies in pretty much the state of Michigan that actually we got busier during COVID than than we ever have. I mean, that was one of our busiest times during that period of time. But the secret that we had was, definitely on the parking lot side of the business. We tried to be more than just a sweeping contractor. We used to use the saying, we were the property manager's property manager. And that's kind of how we tried to sell it. There were so many times where, we had a lot of properties where our guys were on property 7 nights a week. So, I mean, we had guys there every day. We were there more than the property manager was there. So we had different software and programs and stuff that we were running, but we created checklists for a lot of our properties as our guys would be out servicing at night. And, they came across different issues. They would take pictures, send them into the office, and then the next day, the office people would send it out to the property manager and try to get quotes to repair things. So what we found was a lot of times we might not have been the cheapest service provider, but we did find that, a lot of the good properties, the A-list properties, I would call them, found the benefit in having us, paying us a little bit more because we were basically doing their job for them. We let them focus on, keeping the tenants happy, collecting rent checks, whatever they got to do. And we pretty much just oversaw the outside for them. So inherently, we became almost a property manager without even trying. And then it kind of led into a lot more avenues of business where, it seems like stupid things, but, they're like, hey, can you send a guy over to go open this back door for the sprinkler room so they can do testing on the sprinkler system? And it just got to the point where, we would charge for that. And we actually created more lines of, we actually had two porters, we called them, but their sole job was basically go around, inspect properties. If there was some trash laying around, they'd hand pick it up or pick it up with a broom and dustpan, and then they would do property inspections. And we found that we actually ended up making more money with those guys because we didn't have any expensive equipment. Sticking in a pickup truck and a broom and a dustpan was pretty much all we needed besides a clipboard. So it got into a situation where that, I want to say, was our biggest thing on the parking lot side, where we just created basically opportunity by trying to solve problems. At the end of the day, every industry, people are trying to cut back and do more with less. So what we did is, tried to help the property managers out more so they could focus on doing their reports or whatever they had to do to make their customers happy. And we gave them, paper documents that they could then pass on or keep in their files. So when something happened, they had record of it. On the municipality and construction side, municipality wasn't too hard. There's not a whole lot of value to really be added to a lot of the municipalities because they a lot of times just compete on price. But when you got into the construction game, like working with milling crews and asphalt guys, what I found a lot of asphalt guys is they are very unorganized.
Oh, you noticed.
Yeah, which is whatever, it's their thing. But we found, most of the time, asphalt guys weren't very loyal to like one sweeping provider. It was always like, 5, 6 in the morning, day of, they're like, hey, I need a sweeper truck. And it's like, dude, my guys are full. My trucks are full, So what we actually started doing with those guys is, every day we would have, a dispatcher, whoever, reach out to our main asphalt guys beginning of every week, the week before, whatever it was, and just say, hey, what do you got planned for next week? And they're always like, well, depending on weather. It always started with that. And it's like, I got it, dude. So what we would do is try to like pencil them in. And it's like, dude, it's a lot easier for me to cancel a truck than it is to try to find a truck in the middle of the day.
Exactly.
So we kind of became an organizational tool for them. And it's just like, hey, listen, you know what? I'm going to plan a truck for you on Monday and Tuesday over here. You got to cancel it. Fine, we'll cancel it. But I kind of found doing it that way made our lives a lot easier. That way I had it plotted out. And usually if they canceled, I always had work just kind of sitting in the backlog that we can say, okay, hey, you got a short day to like go run and do these 3 jobs and come back and we'll see what happens. And usually by the time they got back from around their way back, somebody else had called and want something else done. So I guess those were probably the biggest things that made us grow was just, adding more on the service side. I mean, yeah, it was an extra step we had to make. It was extra work we had to do, but we found that it kind of forced our customers to, help help them, allow us to help them. Basically, is what it was. It's
Yeah.
not that we were trying to hold their hand or tell them what they had to do, but it allowed us to give a good service and really justify the value of what we were providing.
Dude, you just dropped two wicked business bombs there in that. Yeah, exactly. So number one, like just finding creative solutions to problems. Like if you have a guy on a property for 6 hours a night, you might as well have him proactively look for other things and other solutions, whether that's something you upsell and do yourself or just being there for, for the property manager, the client. Like you said, you're the property manager's property manager. That's a huge thing. We try to take that same approach too. Like,
Yeah.
even if we can't directly solve it ourselves at Laser, like, yeah, we'll try and find you a solution. Like when we get a lot of calls for interior wall painting,
Yeah.
and so it's like, yeah, that's not us. The painting's in the name, but that's not what we do. So what we love to do is, yeah, we built like a small referral network of like, hey, I've got the names and emails right now of two guys that you want to call for this job. Like that just helps people, right? But
Right.
I absolutely love what you said about the asphalt guys. Like most companies, Matt, like when they had that problem that you just described, like they're getting calls at 5 a.m. like, hey, we need sweepers today. Like that's a giant pain in the butt. So most companies, most business owners wouldn't think like you do and would think, why, how do we solve this problem of getting jerked around at the last minute? Like the
Mhm.
simple solution is proactively call them a week in advance and just see if you can get ahead of it. Like that's a great example of like proactive business solutions. So to me, it's not
And
surprising why you scaled so quickly.
yeah, no, and it worked good. And really the biggest thing, probably the biggest hurdle we had, besides always, dealing with people and that kind of stuff. But, one of the biggest problems with the sweeping world is once you start to get that demand, unless you got huge piles of money laying around, it's always like, how do I get more equipment? How do I get more people? And that was always our biggest barrier barrier that we dealt with was, it's like, hey, this guy, this company over here is willing to pay us, big money to have this truck here. They want a truck just parked there. They want a guy to show up, 4 or 5 hours a day, you know, and they wanted that kind of stuff. But it's like, yeah, it's great. It'll pay for itself. But then it's like you start running yourself thin where you just got, it's like, yeah, I can't afford, another $6,000-8,000 a month payment on a truck. And then a guy, I mean, yeah, I know he'll pay for it. But then what if that contract goes away? I'm sitting on a $300,000 piece of equipment that, I'm sure in time I can find a place to reutilize it, but can you carry the note at that point? So that's always the hard part is sweeping and growing super fast is the equipment costs are so high that you can't really keep folding as quick as you can. It's not like landscaping where it's like, hey, go buy another $10,000 mower and throw it out there. It's like, well, yeah, that's another hurdle. Or a striper. I don't know what a striping unit costs, but I'm guessing it's
It's less than a sweeper, Matt.
yes, yeah. Yeah, it's probably different sizes, obviously, but I'm sure if you needed to, you could probably be under 10 grand and be playing the game.
What's up, Pod Squad? This episode of the show is brought to you by our friends at Mighty Line Floor Tape. So, true story, our company started using Mighty Line. We found the product like half a year ago, 2023, we found it and we started using it and I was blown away. The product is incredible. And so many of us in the striping industry want to do interior striping, but we also know that interior striping on concrete usually does not work out very well. This is a fantastic solution. If you have customers that want safe walk lines or customized floor decals, check out their website on Mighty Line. It's incredible. They have an awesome portfolio of stuff. And if you've never tried the product before, head to the website, let them know that you got the info from the podcast, and they will actually send you a free sample box. Check it out, Mighty Line Floor Tape. We are so grateful for them to be sponsoring the podcast. Oh, hey, oh, hey, wait. I
Did you
heard
figure
that.
it out?
Why? I just started hearing your keyboard.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know what that was, but
I
you're
don't
back.
know either. You know what? It might. I don't know. I think it was something on your end, but who knows? I got so many buttons over here. Who knows?
Well, I went in, I was going to try to log in on my computer, see if that changed things, but
Man alive. No,
all
whatever.
right.
No, we got. I was saying you probably couldn't hear me, but I was like, don't worry, we got giant edge of buttons. It's fine.
All right.
I was trying to remember what the last thing you said was. No, I don't remember.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I don't either
Cost of
now.
stripers under 10 grand.
Oh yeah, we talked about just the cost of stripers being a lot cheaper. So I was talking about how um basically, oh yeah, we were talking about, it was kind of the end of it, but we were talking about my biggest hurdle to growing was buying equipment. And
Yeah.
you could never buy enough. It seems like you never buy equipment fast enough, but that was kind of the problem. It's like if you buy the used stuff, how dependable is it going to be? If you're running it 6, 8 hours a day, to where buying the new stuff was good and covered by warranty, but you had the huge payment that you had to carry. So that was always the catch 22 that we were fighting.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. We'll make that a fancy little edit. We'll just make it sound like nothing even happened, even though we just disconnected for 5 minutes. Nah, what happened? It happens, man. Internet fades out. The last thing I wanted to ask you about before we wrap up was about like it struck me when we spoke on that phone call for an hour. Like this guy knows sweeping. Like you know what you're
Mhm.
talking about. But you've also sold the company. Well, it was 2021, right? You sold.
Yeah, I sold in 2021.
2021. Okay. So you're not directly in the business now, but you still have all this like brain knowledge and you obviously have a willingness to help people. And I'm really grateful you decided to come on here and share some insight because a lot of people have these questions like I had them and here you
Yep.
are sharing them. So what's the plan for you going forward? Like what is this going to be like Matt Andrews sweeping consulting or what?
Yeah, so I've been helping buddies in the industry for the last I've been out for probably about a year now. Um Obviously I'm buying my time. We'll see if I end up getting back into it. I obviously have a huge passion for it.
Hmm.
So I wouldn't be surprised if I'm back in it in some form or fashion in the future. But yeah, in the meantime, I've been big in donating my time to my church, my community, that kind of stuff, and helping different people in different industries. We got buddies in the garbage world too, so I've been helping those guys out a little bit. Um, but yeah, just trying to keep things going, stay plugged in until I figure out what the next thing's going to be. But yeah, I really do enjoy the sweeping world. So anything I can do to help people with, definitely let me know.
That being said, like, you don't have like an official website or anything, but like, what is the best way for people to find you if they wanted to, if they listen to this, they're like, hey, I need to know about this sweeping guy. Where do they find you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have any formal, I guess, pages, if you will, but I probably the best way to reach me is through my email, and that is mjandrews36 at gmail.com.
We'll throw that in the
Uh,
show notes as long as you're okay with that. Yeah.
yep, that's fine. Yeah, you guys send me emails, whatever. I'll do what I can to help you guys out. And if I don't have the answer, I can sure find the person that does. So yeah.
Awesome. Okay. I said that was the last question, but there's actually a secret last question. And I'm calling you out a little bit because I told you about this, we were chatting about how I started the podcast and everything. And I told you, like, Matt, there's nobody who has a sweeping podcast, right? Like, there's
Yep.
nobody who had a striping podcast either 2 years ago. So is this potential?
Yeah, it is potential. You definitely piqued my interest, and we're gonna
Well,
have
you
to
got
talk
to
more
do it,
offline
brother.
about it.
You got to do it.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm definitely interested. It's there's a lot of people that helped out and helped me out, and I'd like to return the favor. You know, when I did sell my company, I was sitting on the board of NAPS at the time, and there was a lot of great things we were doing there that I do enjoy giving back. I was luckily enough in the short period of time I was in the business that so many people helped me, got me going, and I feel like I do owe it to the industry to help other people too. So however however that help needs to come, which a podcast is a great idea, and so we'll have to talk more about that down the road.
Oh, we're gonna talk about it. We're gonna talk about it. Well, in the meantime, until that launches, brother, thank you for coming on. I think a lot of people are gonna find some interesting value in there for people who are interested in sweeping, and yeah, just for donating your time, much appreciated.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.